So sorry.
Okay, we are live.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Education Policy Committee meeting. Today is Thursday, May 22nd. The time is now 5:01 p.m. And with me this evening, I have board members Janine Randolph and Mary Ellen Flaherty Ludwig. And from central office, I have Ralph Valenzizi. And this evening, we'll be having discussions on cell phone regulations and also a presentation on restorative measures for student substance abuse. And with that, I will transfer the meeting over to Ralph for the evening. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Carpio, and welcome board. I just wanted to kind of kick it off real quickly. First of all, thanking two partners that we have in this work, which is Positive Directions, as well as Norwalk Acts. So Anna Molina and Margaret, thank you so much. You're going to be hearing presentations from our district-wide student council tonight on some of the work in their final projects of what they've been working on with student council. One of those, we always talk about student voice, and I think I'm very proud to be part of the Norwalk Public Schools and making sure that we actually put that talk into action with our students in many different ways. And tonight's an example of that. Their presentations on looking at how do we take a look at our policy and our regulations and what we can do to be to move these regulations into place is what they've been working on. So they'll be presenting to you some data and research that they've had, that they've worked on with their peers to be able to show us really what hopefully will be things that will go into our regulations as we move forward. So tonight is a time for them to be able to talk about their presentations and share their work. The next steps, though, with this will be to actually then, like I said, especially with the cell phone piece, as well as, when we talk about substance abuse, is get all stakeholders involved to be able to move this forward, beyond this. So tonight's not a night where you're voting on anything. Tonight is a night to be able to kind of hear that first iteration of really, really great drafts of regulations and how we can actually implement them. And then the next steps will be over the summer, really looking at making sure that we get teachers and the administrators and everybody else so that we have all of our, and families and community to be able to help guide us in actually putting these regulations into place. So once again, I can't thank more than anybody else, the students and the work that they've done. Watching them do this in their student council meetings and seeing them work together has been really, really enlightening for me. And thank you, Dr. Gredinger, also for joining too, because she's been part of this whole process on both ends. So with that, the first presentation you're going to hear tonight is on cell phones. And so I'm going to pass this off to Anna Molina from Norwalk Acts, who's been really working with this group. And with that, I will also then, Anna Molina, I'm just going to pull up the PowerPoint presentation. Just tell me when you guys want me to flip to the next slide.
Thank you, Ralph. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am Ana Milena Moreno Lonergan. I am the manager for the Social and Emotional Health Initiative at Norwalk Acts. I'm really excited to be here because this is actually a huge example of collective impact and how us as a membership organization can support our school district, who are our biggest priority right now, making sure all of our kids are involved in these decisions that are being made. And this is a perfect example for it. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of context of my role, what I did here, and then I'll pass it off to the students to share what we have discovered or what we've done. And so I was invited to come in to the Student Leadership Council to help pretty much develop a focus group to hear what the students' needs are and what their thoughts are based off cell phone usage, a social media policy, but really in the context of health and wellness. And so on my end, what I did with the Norwalk Acts Youth Advocates is what we sat down and we developed questions that we wanted to bring in to the student council group. And then we went into the student council group meeting, and then we had 2 amazing sessions in which we were able to post all of our questions on the wall. There were only 4 questions. There are basic questions on why are we using our cell phones? What do we use them for? What are some suggestions on healthy technology habits? What are some effects, positive and negative, that students are seeing within the schools, within their student body, that really indicate the need to create this regulation, really in context of the health and wellness of our young people and students. And lastly, what are their thoughts and suggestions on what they want in this policy and regulation, and really how we can continue to implement that and encourage everyone to understand that this is not something that's bad, but it's really for their own good, for the students' well-being, student bodies, and also really our brain development. And so I really have to give a huge shout out and thank you to the school system for inviting us in. And again, this is a perfect example of how our organization can support all of our systems here and really provide pathways for young leaders to be part of the decision making. So I don't want to give you too much information because our students are going to get deeper into this. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Alexis to kick us off.
Oh, and actually, Alexis, before you guys start, can you just all on the group just each announce who you are? Julian, Alexis, Jada, just so everybody knows.
I'm Alexis.
I'm Jada.
I'm
I'm Julian.
I'm Erin.
I'm Austin.
Wonderful. So we can go ahead and kick it off with Alexis to start off. Thank you all.
So really our main purpose for this whole project is that we want to establish clear expectations for cell phone and device use throughout our schools and in the classroom. We really want to develop just productive learning habits, and also educate ourselves and everyone else in the classroom on like the fact that phones do cause distractions when we're trying to learn. And they do prohibit us from getting like our full agendas done throughout the school day. We want to adapt healthy phone behaviors. And I think a big part of that is understanding that like aspect that, you know, we do need productive learning in this school, and that we should focus on digital literacy and educating ourselves about it. The biggest thing right now is to just show the difference between the developmental stages in kindergarten through 8th graders and the jump to 9th grade to 12th graders. We'll talk more about like what the guidelines we want to meet in each of those grades are in a little bit, but that's our like main purpose for now.
Austin, that's for you.
For general use, for kindergarten through 8th grade, students are only allowed to use their phones before and after school, and they must be turned off and stored away during the day, and they cannot use them during passing time, lunch, or recess. The only time that a student can use their phone during school is for emergency, teacher approved.
Okay, so unlike in elementary school and middle school, at the high school level, we expect that there's a little bit more flexibility with the cell phone usage. So while there's a general school-wide policy, teachers should have the ability to interpret that policy differently in each of their classrooms. So for example, if a student completes an assignment in that class, the teacher may allow them to use their cell phones. And cell phones should be allowed during passing time at lunch and during study halls, but are expected to be stored away either in like a backpack or a phone pouch during class time.
For implementation, I think one of the big problems that we saw, like school-wide, was some teachers weren't consistent about the policies and then others were. So we just wanted to create like consistent application of the policy where everyone kind of had the same understanding. And then just communication about like the reasoning for the school policy. And then opportunities for when like teachers notice that students have been doing good in class, they like allow privileges to be on their phone. Like maybe for the last 5 minutes or during study hall, you're allowed to be on your phone, but just kind of rewarding behavior of like staying focused in class and staying off your phone. Yeah.
All right, so for accountability and consequences, personal device use that disrupts learning or violates school policies may result in temporary loss of privileges or other disciplinary action. For grades K through 12, unauthorized phone use during the school day will result in a sort of progressive system of interventions where the more it goes on, the harsher the punishment will be. For example, it might start out with just a couple warnings, and then it will go to parent notification, and then eventually it could go to confiscation or just no phone use at all for the next day. Um, Misuse of devices for cyberbullying, harassment, unauthorized recordings, or other prohibited activities will result in disciplinary action aligned with the district's code of conduct.
This is for Jada.
Okay, so digital literacy should be taught to students in K through 8 so that once they come to high school, they have a firm understanding of how to use the internet and technology productively and for educational purposes. This will help students understand and like how to maintain a healthy presence on technology, especially because it's such a big part of school, like for things such as research and group projects. I understand that there's not really digital literacy classes offered at the high school level, but I think it's still important to educate students about the importance of things such as screen time and online safety.
So a part of like the guideline that we want to implement is just like having a balanced approach within the classroom. So going back to what Jada said a little bit ago, we do want to implement like a flexible policy. So I know she brought up like the teachers being able to kind of do their own thing within the classroom, but ultimately we just want to focus on like student accountability, self-accountability, understanding like that aspect, as I was saying before, is that our cell phones are a distraction. Obviously our main goal in school and in class is to get the work done that we need to. And then from there, I think it should be up to our teachers and whatever is going on in that moment in the classroom to determine how we and when we can use our cell phones next. And that minimal distraction. And then mental well-being also is a big thing. Like, I don't think we realize as students either most of the time, but our cell phones do cause a lot of distraction throughout the day. And if you're hooked on something you saw on your phone 5 minutes ago, it will distract you even if you don't have your phone in that moment. So I think just creating like a healthy atmosphere about like educating ourselves about it is a big thing as well.
And I'll jump in with this one real quick. So really our next steps as we were discussing this is, taking the feedback that we get from this meeting as well as from other stakeholders to be able to look at editing, how we can create a final regulation to bring to you sometime in August. But we do know that we do need to reach out to teachers. We need to reach out to our administrators. We want to reach out to families too, to be able to get a little bit more feedback. And most of those will be in the form of surveys to be able to get more information so we can actually bring this back for final approval to be able to have a regulation in place for the beginning of the 2025-26 school year. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. That was our presentation for tonight. And I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions for our wonderful students.
Well, I'm curious to know, why would you not want use during passing lunch or recess? How would you explain that?
For K through 8?
Mm-hmm.
I think during K through 8, it's a good time to, like we were talking about digital literacy. I know Jada said we don't have actual classes that teach that responsibility. Especially as young as kindergartners, like you don't know when kids are getting their phones, and I think not having them throughout the day at all will create that healthy habit of having that self-resilience almost. So when they get to high school, they're okay and like with this adaptation of not using it during the class time.
Thank you.
How do you think your peers feel about these possible regulations? Do you think they're on the same page?
Oh, you can talk, Erin.
Okay. I think most of our friends do agree that sometimes phones really do negatively affect like our grades and the way how we're attentive in class. Obviously, some kids want their phones on them and they like having it on them, but I think it also draws into being able to share like that realization that phones really do have a negative impact. And like, yeah, we're gonna want our phones on us, but you really just gotta figure out like that they're not good for use in school, and it's kind of a realization that we have to bring attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Data, did you have anything to add to that?
No, Erin kind of summed it up. I just think that in life in general, like there's going to be things that you don't want to do. And obviously it'll be an adjustment, but it's for the best.
Thank you.
I would like to support what Erin and Jada just said in the sense of the particularly K through 8. It enables students not only not to be distracted, but also to be focused on sharing talk and experiences with friends. There's a big aspect of what does it mean to be a friend? What does it mean to be listening or sitting bored with somebody and making a joke about it? This is part of being a human being that's sensitive and interested in other people around them. So I see that no phones at all from K through 8 during the day as possibly very productive. And keep in mind, if you go back 10 years, we didn't have this joy and we didn't have this problem. So it's really the big question to me is not only distraction, but what does it mean to be a human being?
My other question is, why the difference between K to 8 and 9 to 12? Why those grades and why?
I think we can all agree that obviously we know in Norwalk Public Schools, like elementary school, you are in one school, then you jump to middle school, and then you jump to high school. So obviously each shift to a different school is going to be a big jump for you. But I think just the maturity to talk about going from middle school to high school when you're with so many different people, different ages, I think it is a big shift. And I think in middle school, obviously in high school, our brains are still developing, but I think in middle school, you're still like in a very developmental stage where you're not really quite ready for as much as like the maturity that you would see or be faced with in high school. And I think it goes along like what we were saying before. There's nothing teaching you in elementary school, middle school, there's nothing teaching you, okay, this is how you talk to people, this is how you should act in public. These are kind of just things you have to learn, social skills you have to learn when you're met with different maturity levels like that. So I think it's good to learn that at a younger age before you get into high school. And then high school is kind of your years to get ready for college and like on to bigger things, if that makes sense.
I have one more. You ladies don't have anything else?
Julian, did you want to say something to that?
Yeah. So I think that again, when you're like when it's K through 8, it's also like that time where you're like also developing a lot of your social skills and kind of just like forming bonds that you'll have for life. So, and when we're on our phones, I think that really disrupts that. I remember I didn't really get a phone till like later, and that really allowed me to like form deeper connections with people because I wasn't preoccupied with my phone. So I think that it's really it'll be beneficial for K through 8, and I think they'll actually have like a better time with this regulation.
How do you suggest that we get the teacher consistency in the classroom? So they're all kind of following the same regulation, the same policies.
I think just a good solution is just having everyone do the same thing. Like some people don't have the phone pockets that they put up on a door inside their closet. Some people just say put it away in your bag. I think if everyone just has the same rule of just putting your phone up, and you put your phone up when you walk in the classroom and you take your phone and you walk out, and some teachers let students have their phones when they leave to go to the bathroom or when they leave class. I think just keeping it really like one universal rule in the classroom is the best way just to like eliminate any like leniency when it comes to teachers in the
They'll
policy.
come up with whatever the rule is going to be and just
Right. Just
across the board.
yeah.
Well, then that question also runs into the flexibility part when you discussed,
Which-
letting a student have it the last 5 minutes or so at the end of the classroom. One, that means the teacher is breaking the rules. And two, is it really equitable for another student to see their friends be able to get their phone because they're, they understand the class better, they ended doing their work faster. Why could they get the phone, but I'm struggling here and I can't get my phone?
That's a good point. In one of my classes, my teacher takes attendance based off of our phone being in the pouch. And even in that class, we kind of work bell to bell, so we're not even really allowed to get our phones out of the pouches. We kind of added that part in because we do understand that we still are teenagers and we're gonna want to go on our phones. So it was almost like a point of like a break almost. But it obviously, if we wanted to take this further, we would have to do more research and gather other like opinions. But it's definitely tricky because like again, we are teenagers, we're gonna go on our phones, and you're right, it's not really fair if I have my phone because I finished the work, but Alexis isn't done and she doesn't get to finish the work. So I think it's just a work in progress.
Jada, I think you hit the right word there. It is tricky. It's tricky for the teenagers in high school, and it's tricky for the teacher because the teacher might be tired that day. Pick my battles. I'm not going to pick this battle, and soon enough, the good intentions of what we want to do get kind of mixed up. In every class you come to, it's a different thing. It seems to me that is also that is a contradiction of allowing it. I think people should be rewarded for finishing their work early, but to be rewarded with cell phones, it's kind of going against what you're saying about concentration. You could be rewarded with you could read something related to what you've just studied. You could solve a puzzle that might be in the room for those that finish early. Something that's I find it's contradiction to reward somebody with something that we're saying, isn't that healthy for you? So I'm having, that's an issue, consistency, and then what do we want to reward? Justin, do you have an idea about that?
Well, something to think about since this isn't the first time and last time we'll be discussing. But just something to keep in mind.
Yes, no, definitely. And I think that if I can add, if you just guys, you did an awesome job. One of the things that we did talk about at one point or another, though, was that idea of standard and flexibility, of potentially having a maybe not just having one standard, but having maybe one or two examples of like how a teacher can manage it, but keeping it at least consistent within a framework. You know, to make it a little bit easier, so that then it's easier for the teacher, it's easier for the students, and everybody understands that that's just that's how we can operate. But this is a huge conversation that you know, as time's going on, it's actually getting bigger and bigger. You know, we were talking right before this meeting about you know, what's going on in Westport, that they've actually made it a point that they're not going to, like, the high schools will not be having cell phones. It will be a ban, and how that for the 25-26 school year. You know, so I'm kind of curious to see how this is going to roll out. But we do know that the work that you guys have done and the thoughtfulness that
Very thoughtful, very thoughtful. I want to say that.
Us adults are learning from the students. I mean, the way you spoke at the meeting at City Hall to us when we were in the audience and not sitting behind the desks where all the students were, that was very impressive, just to hear the conversations.
Yeah. But we definitely appreciate the feedback, and I can't thank you know, because this is obviously the group that I got a chance to work with a little bit more with Anna Molina, and just so impressed with the way that you guys handled you know, taking a look and tackling this issue, which is going to be a big issue. And once again, I'm really proud that as a district, we're starting with students and building our way up to figure out exactly how do we kind of solve a problem, because you guys are actually, you know, part of the solution for an issue that affects you. And that's really the way that we should be handling most of our issues.
I solidly support that. These will affect you, and you are the solution. How you develop your attitudes, how, when you think of whatever you were thinking before you got this challenge, I bet some of you have changed your mind a little bit about what it means to be healthy relating to technology, instead of just simply, you know, going ahead. So things have changed inside of you, and if you could help others change slightly too. I do want to add that not just Westport, but the whole state of New York is going bell to bell. So that's K through 12, bell to bell. Of course, there are exceptions for you know, certain kids with certain needs, but in general, it's going to be a little shock to the system. But that's part of what we should talk about too. How are they do that? Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate your work and tackling. I think this is how we should go at a lot of things, just like anything about the future, that we do it together, not to think, you know, we have some wisdom being older. Imagine yourself when you're older, you should have some experiences that will help, but we don't have all the answers. And we need to do what we're doing now, really work together, acknowledge each other's brilliance at time, and you know, learn from each other and fashion something that will help everybody.
I have a wondering, am I allowed? I don't know the form so much. Am I allowed to ask some questions? As I do that, my dogs go a little crazy. For the kids, so one of my questions is, have you seen, or what do you think about, would kids try to rush through their work if, let's say, there was a phone conversation or text exchange that was going on, and then we have to put it in there? do you think that might be something that would happen based on using it as a reward for being done with your work early is one of my questions. So I guess I'll start there.
I would like to touch on that. I think that definitely is a thing that a lot of like students try to do is they just rush through it. They just want to get their phone. They don't care about their grade, but then it will eventually affect them. You'll see like your test score, and it's kind of like that's just got to be a learning curve for the individual student. Like you want to rush through your work, it's gonna at that point it's not the teacher's fault. It's the student's fault, and it's gonna eventually like fall on them. And it's if you want to rush through your work and then like get it done in 15 minutes when you have 50 minutes to do it, then it's kind of you're gonna see it reflect in your grade. That's just that's just kind of how you're gonna deal with that.
I also want to just touch on that. I actually think that being like in school day to day, I feel like I'm not seeing that as much because the issue I feel that is more important is I'll be in a class where my teacher has no phone policy. They kind of give us free will. And I'll jump from that class to my next class where I'm made to put up my phone in the pocket, bell to bell most of the time. Um, so I think the struggle is more establishing like a boundary where I'm basically allowed to have my phone the whole time, and it's kind of up to me, up to my self-resilience if I want to get my work done that period, or I could spend the whole period on my phone and then having to go to a next class where I'm forced to just work and focus in that class, if that's making sense. But I think that's more of a struggle because I don't really see a lot where a lot of my teachers are telling us to put the phones up and then we're getting them as a reward at the end. I think that's why we talked about it because right now I feel like while it is up to the teachers in every class to implement the policy that they choose, it's kind of like very loose and I think it's a little too flexible right now. So I think it's hard to just jump from a really loose guideline to going to one that's pretty strict. And I think it does create a little bit of conflict there.
Thank you for that feedback. That was really helpful. One of the things, another question that I have for you guys is we talked about kind of like some self-monitoring, right? I heard you guys say that you need to monitor yourself. My wondering is, what would you like to see from Norwalk Public Schools, or what would it be something that you would need to be able to implement that for yourself? We talked about not necessarily getting, needing more social skills to work with our friends and talk with each other. Would you need support around how to do that for yourself or instruction about it?
For me, I think it's a lot about the teacher's understanding as well. I think a big part of like this new guideline that we're trying to implement is just the education part of it. Like we talked about before, the K through 8 is a time, a really like developmental period. So I think obviously our grade specifically, juniors, seniors, we kind of like grew up without really knowing where like cell phones would take us, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean.
Yeah, I think we were kind of like the experimental group, if that makes sense. Like we didn't have a lot of like education about what we would turn into if we were spending all this time on our phone. So I think that's why it's really important to create like a stricter guideline in the K through 8 grades because it will kind of develop them subconsciously to not be on that during school, to know when it's the right time, to know when it's not the right time. And hopefully by the time they get to high school, that will kind of like kick in their brain just again subconsciously. So it's not even something you really think about by then. So I think it's about the education part and like yourself, but also kind of teachers now in high school understanding like this is kind of like an educational piece that you have to build up to be able to just have that self monitoring.
I actually want to touch on that. I think one thing that's really important when implementing a policy is also explaining why and explaining the science that like how cell phones actually do affect and like if you're gonna be implementing a policy like to show students like why we're doing this in the first place because kids could just be like, oh, they just don't want us on their phones. They just want their attention at them. But it's like there's actual like studies and there's proven research how like phones affect students. And I think to implement a policy needs to follow with an explanation right behind that too. I think that's something big that teachers should also be implementing, along with like disciplining students for having their cell phones out, following it with the reasoning for why.
Thank you, Erin. That was really good feedback from both of you. Thank you.
And thank you to the whole group again. So I really appreciate and love working with you guys too as well. And with that, Chairman Carpio, I can, if you'd like, we can move on to our next presentation. Like I said, cell phone group, you are more than welcome to stay on, but I know that if you had other things to do, you can leave. But you may want to actually hear the next one as well too. So.
And thank you for having us too, and great job. These students have everything I ever wanted to maybe interject, and they're already topping it off. So shout out to all of you guys. You should be very proud of yourselves, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. And Margaret, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll pull up the presentation for you guys to get started.
All right, thanks, Ralph. Hi, everybody. Cell phone group, that was really fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all that. I'm really happy that 2 of the 3 members of our cohort 1 group are here tonight. So shout out to Via Lee, who's here, and now I can't see her on my screen, Jalise Morbell Rios, or Rios Morbell, sorry. Ashlyn Seiler is sick tonight and couldn't join us. But we are a group that was working on alcohol, nicotine, and other drug policy work. When Ralph shows the screen, I'll give you some context, and then the students will take it away. Yeah, here we go. Okay, and so I'm Margaret Watt. I work at Positive Directions. We're a nonprofit in town that does mental health and substance prevention, treatment, and recovery. And I'm also the leader of the Norwalk Partnership, which is a citywide group of people working together around keeping our youth mentally healthy and substance free. And we're the ones who conduct that youth survey every other year that you all took in the fall, and that informs a lot of this work. So Ralph, if you could show the next slide. As context, part of what a group of us who are involved with the Norwalk Partnership were already doing this year was looking at what are the consequences when students use substances on school grounds and break the ATOD or ANOD code of conduct. So I want to give a shout out to Dr. Robin Gredinger, who's here, and Ryan Harold, who's the Director of School Security. The 3 of us had a ton of meetings this year, and also Diamond Seed from School-Based Health Centers. We've been really looking at how can we create a code of conduct that's really equitable and very, very restorative, because we know that when students, we know from our survey, most students aren't using substances. When they are, you know, they might be more visible in the bathrooms, because if you've got an addiction, that's where you kind of got to go use it. We want to help them, not hurt them. And so there's 3 elements of the work that this cohort worked on, and you're going to hear about the regulations tonight. But in particular, in terms of the code of conduct, we are looking at how detentions or suspensions, whatever they are, when students are caught in violations, would be used for psychoeducation. And we've identified specific free softwares that they can use targeted to the substance they're using. And some of the time is used to meet with a counselor for a full, what we call checkup from the neck up, screening them for depression, anxiety, other substance use, figure out what's going on, and connect them to the right resources in school, because we have all these great school-based resources. And so have a couple of counseling sessions, you know, as a very baseline, just keep it limited when it's a first offense. So this cohort of students heard about all the work we were doing on code of conduct, gave their input, liked the proposal, and then what they did additionally is, so that's the first bullet you see here. They looked at this, talked about it. Then they looked at the board policy document on alcohol, nicotine, and other drugs. And we have comments we would love to share and input to the policy committee around that document. Some of it is very limited, and some of it is just things that maybe haven't been thought of or incorporated into there. And then at Ralph's suggestion, he pointed out that for most things, I guess, just the Board of Ed has a policy, and then that's a more general state law-based kind of document. And then there's a regulation that gets a little more into the weeds around what does this look like? How do we implement it? How do we make it fair and equitable? And then the sort of final tier of the documentation is the code of conduct. So these students, I'm trying to list that these students have looked at all of those or talked about all of those, and there were no ANOD regulations. So there's a link here to a draft document that they've created from scratch. We're not going to read it tonight. They're going to present some slides to cover the content. But I think, we'd be happy to come back at like when you all get into the weeds with the comments on the policies and the regulations. So at this point, you're going to hear more of the details of the regulations, but I wanted you to know about all the work that's going on with the students, without the students, all of it coming together. They've given input into all of it. So next is Jalise on the next screen, please.
Okay, so smoking in schools is a serious issue in the school system. It is an issue that affects students, teachers, and the way that not only the students who are partaking in the substance abuse, but also the other students who are not. Smoking can cause significant health risks and encourages bad habits among new learners. And schools are meant to be safe spaces for students to learn, and smoking negatively affects this. It negatively impacts kids' mental health, and kids might go about using substances to cope with things that are going throughout their life.
Do you want the next slide, Jalise?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we were researching the topic, we found out that there were many more negative effects to vaping or smoking than positive effects. And here are some health risks, such as respiratory issues, increased cancer risks, high blood pressure, weakened immune system, risk of heart attack or stroke, dental problems, can cause infections, increased risk of diabetes. It can lower bone density, or it can harm the development of teens' brains.
Okay, so within this document, we want to talk about the purpose of it and the core principles especially. So we want to make sure that this document is restorative and it has a supportive approach to substance violations. We don't want to just accuse that student and give that student like the disciplinary actions just because they're caught smoking. We want to make sure that the student is heard, and we want it to be fair and for there to be consistent consequences across all student groups. We want to provide student input and ensure enlightenment across the ATOD policy and the code of conduct. We also want to focus on the well-being and accountability of this. So we don't just want to say like, oh, you were caught using the substance, so you can just do this and we will forget about it. No, we want to make sure that what we're implementing will actually teach them and go a long way in the future. We want to also make sure that this applies to all students and addresses adult violations as well. So for this section, we have rules, responses, and emergencies. We want to make sure that there's no possession, use, distribution, or sale of illegal substances on campus or grounds. We want to make sure that what we want with these violations is set in stone. So these violations, they'll result in detention, suspension, use for education, screening, and counseling. So we don't just want to, give them a punishment just because. We want to make sure that they're learning from their mistakes. And we also want to make sure there's tiered consequences for repeated offenses. So there's no warnings for first-time use. Like you need to be held accountable for what you did. We need to make sure that these substances are confiscated and tested by law enforcement for legal purposes. Narcan should be stored in the nurse's office, AED stations, and with security as well. We want to make sure that the staff is also trained to respond to opioid overdoses, and 911 is called when needed. And there should be social worker referral for non-opioid overdose threats. Okay, so for this section, we have equity, student breaks, and communication. We want to make sure that enforcement is fair and unbiased so that there's no special treatment. And just because a student may have a special bond with the staff, it doesn't really affect what's going on like with the substance abuse. And the consequences for alcohol, nicotine, and cannabis should be the same. There should be like, well, this is worse than the other. I think we all thought that this should be the same level of consequence. We want to also have the courtyards available for healthy breaks, and it should be closed temporarily if the substance use occurs, not just closed permanently, because that could actually have a more negative consequence. We want to
Yeah, I
make
just want to jump in and link that back to what Jalise was saying, right, about like students are smoking in bathrooms. You guys had a lot of conversation around that. It's partly just to have a social break, right? And
Yeah.
so if only there was a healthy place to go. Sorry.
Exactly. We want to also make sure that the staff, they're trained annually because you never know what the next substance may be, because no one really expected for nicotine to be the next upcoming substance. So we want to make sure that everyone is aware and on the same level so they are more educated in how to be trained for like certain situations. We want to make sure that the policies are reviewed yearly with student/family input and data monitored for equity and trends, like as mentioned before. We want to make sure that the students are informed through orientations, posters, and handbooks so that even though if they think there will be no consequences or they think that this will be okay in this situation, that's not the case. And it would be harder for them to attest to the fact that we did not tell them, but we will be able to tell them through orientations, posters, and handbooks. And our main goal is to foster responsibility. We want wellness and respect in all schools. And the main way we can do that is by limiting and ultimately like eliminating substance abuse.
Okay, so like Via said, we want our students to be informed about the new policy, and not only the students, but like the teachers, parents. So starting from the left to the right, the first poster is a poster that is an overview of the policy, and it talks about like the consequences if you're found using a substance and what you can do to get better. The second one covers what students who might not be taking substances can do to help support their classmates, and such as taking your mental health seriously. You can speak up to support a friend. We also want to create a safer space for everyone. We noticed that most of the problems with substance abuse are happening in the bathrooms, and Via and I, and also Ashlyn, who's not here, we discussed that a lot of students who aren't using substances aren't using the bathrooms because a lot of that is going down in the bathrooms and nobody wants to get closer to it. The last poster covers how our policy requires vape detectors to clear the air and to create cleaner spaces.
I want to add in, oh, go ahead, finish up, please.
I also want to add that Ashlyn isn't here, but she was supposed to write a letter or an email to parents from students to give parents the knowledge that the policy is happening and to help better support their kids.
Thank you so much, Jalise. Yeah, and I want to add, you know, I think that's kind of a next step on this end too, is after the board has heard this and is in agreement, part of what the group wanted to do was educate other students about the plan, the policies, the consequences, and also educate parents and have it come from students. The other thing I want to add on with the beautiful posters that you just saw is there's another cohort of students that Student Council Cohort 2 also has a group that wanted to work on ANOD stuff, but they really wanted to raise awareness. So they are not only making some other posters that would be complementary, they also highlighted the same issues. They're kids who go all day long without using the restrooms because they don't want the secondhand smoke, right? I don't think that's healthy for anyone physically. And with some of those posters through the Norwalk Partnership funding, we're going to be able to do some geofencing around our schools so that the banners from the students' posters will show up on kids' cell phones, a positive use of cell phones. Like if they go in and out of the school building during a given day, they will be delivered these sort of ads that are the vaping posters that the students made. So I thought that was cool, and I thought everyone would want to know that.
Yeah, that's great about the vaping notifications on the phones. As a notes, we get it when we're grocery shopping and we're in a certain aisle. All of a sudden, the item that you bought last week comes up on your phone. This is all great information. I do like all the student voices. The one thing I do want to make you aware is that we're not against any of this. We have been actually talking about vape detectors, but that is also a financial stress on the district. we would have to try to get the funding for that. And as you know, right now, the budget season is a very difficult one, and we are working about funding on other items, but vape detectors is on there. So it's not that we don't want to have them, is that at the moment we can't afford them. But if we can think of other ways to fund them, if it's, state law or something, but even that sometimes doesn't work because the state can pass it as law, but then it's not funded, then we're back in the same boat. But I'm loving all these ideas. I love the posters. I don't really have questions, only because as a mom, I hear a lot of this, especially being on a few of the parents groups at the schools and at the high schools. We get to hear a lot of this. So I myself do not have any questions. I don't know if Mary Ellen or Janine have any comments or questions.
I don't have any questions. I'm just, like you, I'm really glad that you guys are doing this and you brought this to our attention, and want to bring it to your peers' attention as well. It's well thought out. I love the posters, and the idea of the technological hit with it as well. And I just think it's great what you guys are presenting and what you're involved in.
Same for me. I don't have any questions, but I just want to point out, I love the poster that says "clear the air." It's just like a little bit witty, like a turn of that phrase. And in two ways, we can like clear the air in this discussion of, hey, this is really important to us that everybody's healthy in my class. And that I know personally, my mother got lung cancer because my father was a heavy smoker. I mean, the secondhand smoke is not a joke. But using posters, using kind of the good peer pressure of not only do you want to be healthy and be able to go to the bathroom and not have to, deal with something abusive, that you want the person who is smoking or whatever they're doing to be healthy too, and kind of connect them. There's an anxiety going on that could be underlining, but the biggest thing is the cool factor. And if it becomes uncool to use some kind of substance, then that would be quite a turnaround, and we wouldn't need the vape detectors. So you are, the students that are here, to me, are just extremely in a position to be powerful to turn things around.
Mary Ellen, I want to add that, because Norwalk High does have vape detectors, but the other building doesn't, right? And one of the things we hear consistently from students in terms of what's cool or not cool, right, is when the vape detectors go off and everyone has to go outside in the freezing cold weather, or when it happened to my son who was in swim class in November, soaking wet in the freezing cold, that creates a lot of peer pressure right there, where kids are like, stop vaping it, stop setting off the vape detectors, right? So that, I think that this student group really, and the other student group who aren't here because it wasn't a policy issue with them, but they were just they're all in agreement. I mean, and I think most of us as parents, when I used to be on SGC, like if the courtyards were open, kids would have a mental health and a physical health and a natural break that is more positive than a substance break, right? And I think you saw that part where the policy we were talking about, well, what if kids just go outside and vape? Well, then you shut down the courtyard, and then everyone else goes, don't do that, because then the courtyards get shut down, and that will create a natural consequence where people want right? I mean, they want the courtyards.
Yeah, I remember the courtyards. Like you said, Margaret, way back when a day, those courtyards were available to us to just go out there, finish homework between breaks, bringing your lunch out there. It was just a great situation. Those are also conversations we have had with the buildings themselves individually with the principals. So we're hoping and working on that to open those up again.
That'd be great. And I just add, because since the director of school security is out on medical leave right now, when we talked about it with him, You know, I know when I was on school governance council at Norwalk High, one of the things that kept coming up was how are security guards going to monitor the courtyards if people are outside? But he said that his first reaction when he came to the district was, why aren't they open? They're all surrounded by glass, so you can see that you don't have to have security in there. You can see it from anywhere. So I just thought it was so positive that the director's security was like, this is doable. We can make this work.
Okay, any other questions, Janine, Mary Ellen? We're all good?
Thank you.
Can just say, Via and Jalise, once again, you guys did a great job, and hopefully, the board also sees like how empowering it is to be able to have our students being able to have a voice, which is something that I've seen in the last few years, and just something that's been wonderful about some of the changes that have been coming to the Norwalk Public Schools. So, but you guys really did do a great job. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank
Ralph,
you.
can you give us all a
Thank you.
timeline on next steps? So like, you know, they have comments on the policy document also, and if Ashlyn's going to write a letter to come home from parents and all that, are we thinking implementation of everything is really for the next school year?
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, usually, once again, with the first one, with cell phone policy, we have to be implemented in this net. Like that's going to be, so we have a deadline.
Hmm.
When it came to some other policies, though, sometimes it takes a number of reads and it takes a number of of gathering of data to see where we need to go with this. So, I mean, I think the next steps really are, once again, continuing to look at the code of conduct, continuing to look at once again, the idea of a regulation and how that could be implemented and help support the work that's going on. We would bring that back through a calendar at one point or another during this coming year, because the summer basically is calendared out to get a couple of different already policies and regulations in place for the upcoming school year to begin the year, mainly fundraising and cell phones. But then starting in September, we create a calendar that goes on. So we would actually then make sure that we kind of incorporate it somewhere within where it actually makes sense, with potentially some other policies that may be linked to that ideally, so that then we can actually look at the next steps of getting any updates to our current policies and regulations that need to be put in place.
Okay. Okay. And I know code of conduct is like within the purview of security, like, so code of conduct changes can be implemented anytime, and that's the intention for, like, we've kind of already started, Robin, right? But then so the policy and the regulations would be like on a calendar for a future board meeting to finalize.
Yes, definitely. So, but I mean, this is an incredible start. Being able to once again have the students drive that work is what we really want to see more and more often, is having our students helping to develop the policies, regulations, protocols that affect them and their learning. Thank you.
You guys, Jalise and Via and Ashlyn in absentia, like, you all were awesome. Everything you did was great. Everything from the posters to the feedback. I hope everyone on the committee will take a look at all the at the full regulations that they drafted that were in the link.
Yes, absolutely. Kudos to everyone for all the hard work.
Yeah. With that, Chairman Carpio, I'll turn it back to you.
Yes, well, thank you. And with that, thank you for everyone for being here this afternoon, this evening, because it's already evening. I know it's been a long day for everyone. I want to thank all the students that had joined us today, and Anna Melina and Margaret also for joining us, and Dr. Gredinger also for being here this evening. And with that, if I can have a motion to adjourn. Mary Ellen, thank you.